EPA 608 Type 1 100 question master exam. What defines a small appliance under EPA 608 Type 1? Any appliance with a factory charge of 5 pounds or less. Which refrigerant classification indicates high flammability and low toxicity? A3. Required vacuum level using self-contained recovery equipment on an operating compressor, post 1993. 10 inches Hg. Which refrigerant has zero ozone depletion potential? R134A. Primary hazard when servicing appliances containing R600A. High flammability. Components most likely to contain trapped refrigerant after recovery. Accumulator. What must be done before using a piercing type access valve? Recover refrigerant first. Cylinder color for R134A. Light blue. EPA requirement for disposing of a small appliance. Refrigerant must be recovered before disposal. Recovery method using the appliance compressor. Passive recovery. Maximum allowable factory charge for a Type 1 appliance. 5 pounds. Which refrigerant is a hydrocarbon used in modern small appliances? R600A. EPA fine for knowingly venting refrigerant. $27,500 per day. Required tool when opening a sealed system. Piercing valve. Purpose of a refrigerant identifier. Verify refrigerant purity. Which EPA section prohibits intentional release of refrigerants? Section 608C2. Condition required for passing recovery on a non-operating compressor. System must be pressurized. Common replacement for R12 in small appliances. R134A. Maximum allowable leak rate for small appliances. 0%. Component most likely damaged by overheating during brazing. Capillary tube. Primary purpose of a vacuum pump. Remove moisture and non-condensables. Which refrigerant is classified as A1? R34A. Requirement before disposing of a used refrigerant cylinder. Recover refrigerant and render cylinder useless. Tool required to verify refrigerant purity. Refrigerant identifier. Primary environmental concern with HFCs. Global warming potential. Recovery method requiring a working compressor. Passive recovery. Purpose of a filter dryer. Remove moisture and contaminants. Which refrigerant is a natural refrigerant? R600A. What must be done before opening a sealed system? Recover the refrigerant. Condition indicating pressure of non-condensables. High head pressure. Which component in a small appliance is most likely to contain oil-logged refrigerant during recovery? Compressor. Why must recovery equipment be certified by an EPA approved laboratory? To verify it meets required evacuation levels. Which refrigerant is commonly used in compact refrigerators? R600A. Purpose of a system-dependent passive recovery device. Rely on system pressure or compressor operation. When is self-contained recovery equipment required? When the compressor is not operational. EPA requirement for technicians servicing small appliances. Must hold at least a Type 1 certification. Which refrigerant is an HCFC? R22. Primary environmental concern with HCFCs, ozone depletion. Tool required to ensure a sealed system is moisture-free before charging. Vacuum pump. Purpose of a process tube. Provide access for service procedures. Which refrigerant is non-flammable and low toxicity? R134A. Why avoid mixing refrigerants? Makes recovery and recycling impossible. Condition indicating a restricted capillary tube. Low suction pressure. What must be done before replacing a filter dryer? Recover the refrigerant. Which refrigerant is commonly found in older refrigerators? R12. Condition indicating system overcharge. High head pressure. Purpose of a capillary tube. Meter refrigerant into the evaporator. Which refrigerant is an HFO? R1234YF. Requirement when recovering refrigerant with a non-working compressor using system-dependent equipment. Access both high and low sides. Sign of moisture in a sealed system. Frost at the capillary tube inlet. Hazard of using a torch near hydrocarbon refrigerants. Explosion risk. Which refrigerant requires spark-proof recovery equipment? R600A. Purpose of purging nitrogen during service. Prevent oxidation during brazing. Component that separates liquid refrigerant from oil. Accumulator. EPA requirement for storing recovered refrigerant. Must be stored in DOT-approved refillable cylinders. Condition indicating non-condensables after charging. High head pressure. Purpose of a piercing valve. Provide temporary access to the sealed system. Refrigerant found in older window AC units. R22. Requirement for technicians handling flammable refrigerants. Use spark-proof tools and equipment. Purpose of a vacuum gauge. Measure system pressure below atmospheric. Condition indicating system undercharge. High superheat. Requirement when using system-dependent recovery with a working compressor. Run the compressor to assist recovery. Refrigerant requiring grounding and bonding. R600A. Purpose of a Schrader valve core removal tool. Remove refrigerant faster by increasing flow. Condition indicating restricted filter dryer. Frost or temperature drop across the dryer. Requirement for recovering flammable refrigerants. Use spark-proof recovery equipment. Purpose of a condenser. Reject heat. Condition indicating failed compressor. No pressure change during recovery. Requirement before disposing of a hydrocarbon refrigerant appliance. Recover the refrigerant using approved equipment. Purpose of a heat exchanger: increase subcoating and superheat efficiency. Condition indicating refrigerant undercharge. High superheat. Requirement for system-dependent recovery on a system with a working compressor. Run the compressor. Refrigerant requiring grounding and bonding. R600A. Purpose of Schrader valve: core removal. Increase refrigerant flow. Condition indicating restricted filter dryer. Frost across the dryer. Condition indicating system overcharge. High head pressure. Purpose of capillary tube: meter refrigerant. HFO refrigerant. R1234YF. Requirement for non-working compressor recovery: access both sides. Sign of moisture: frost at cap tube inlet. Hazard with hydrocarbons. Explosion risk. Spark-proof refrigerant. R600A. Nitrogen purge purpose: prevent oxidation. Oil separator component: accumulator. Storage requirement: DOT approved cylinders. Non-condensable signs. High head pressure. Piercing valve purpose: temporary access. Older window AC refrigerant. R22. Flammable refrigerant requirement: spark-proof tubes. Vacuum gauge purpose: measure vacuum level. Purpose of heat exchanger: increase efficiency. Undercharge sign: high superheat. Requirement for system-dependent recovery: run compressor. Grounding refrigerant: R600A. Schrader tube purpose: increase flow. Restricted dryer sign: frost. Flammable refrigerant recovery requirement: spark-proof equipment. Condenser purpose: reject heat. Failed compressor sign: no pressure change. Disposal requirement: recover refrigerant. That's the end. There was some repeats on there. Probably the last 25. We'll make it better. Done in under 15 minutes.